Hello and welcome to this video, and I guess happy Halloween week! I'm very excited, and of course I had to make another Halloween craft, and this one I'm actually using a variety of different materials that I've never used before, starting with the lightweight Sculpey, which I've never tried before, so I'm really excited to see how that works. And I'm using that to sculpt my ghosts. I shaped them with some aluminium foil as a base core, and then I just covered most of the top with a thin layer of the lightweight clay, and then add in some snakes to make folds. And I'm making a variety of ghosts because I want to make them in two little poses, and they're also gonna get some cute little friends on their heads. So the first one I'm starting to make is going to lean on the edge and lean on his arms, and the second one is looking like it's trying to lift itself out of the potion, and I really hope I can manage this. So I'm just using the clay like I normally would. It feels a bit more almost like foam clay, but not really. So it was really interested to blend it, but it's definitely really soft and light. And so the blending took me a little bit longer because I had to kind of get accustomed to it. But once I got it, I finally got all the folds. For the first one, I just added the arms simply to the side and then made some eye folds. For the second one, I made the eyes, made the arms, and then I decided, it's leaning on itself. So I wanted to add some little creases underneath its eyes. When you push your cheek skin up in your face when you're leaning on it, and that really added to the cuteness, I think. I'm really happy I decided to do that. And then of course it's time to add the arms back again, and the tools I'm using for the eyes are mainly just ball stylus and then a little bit of my silicone shaper to blend everything in. And while that's baking, I'm going to make the little companions. Now sadly my camera cut out midway making the frog, so I only have part of it, but I basically shaped the body and then added round and tiny cone shaped pieces for the back legs and the front legs. And I didn't really blend them in too much, I just added them to the side of the body to make sure that they hold, but I really wanted them to still have some definition because this frog is very small. And I wanted it to be simple and cute still too, so I'm not adding too many details. The spider is the same, I'm literally just rolling out a ball of clay and adding some little leggies, and I'm not making an armature base before because I'm gluing all the legs down, so I'm not too worried about them falling out. And then it's time to attach them to the ghost after baking, and for this I'm just using super glue and filling in all the gaps, forming the legs a little bit more so they actually sit nicely on the ghost. And then the frog I also just position on there with some super glue, and honestly this worked really well. I wasn't too sure how the clay would react, but it worked really nicely. Now onto the cauldrons for these guys. And these are actually just really cheap plastic cauldrons. They came with some metal handle things, but those I plopped off, and I filled the holes with some just standard leftover pieces of foam, and then it was time to already prime this. And for that I just mixed my normal white gesso with some black to get this grey base, and then I'm going over everything with some black to get the actual color. And these are just standard acrylics, nothing fancy. This project really didn't need much in terms of special paints or anything. And to make it metallic looking, I'm adding some just golden bronzish metallic paint onto a sponge, and I'm dabbing it on, and the black base really helps it shine and pop. And I'm not trying to fully cover everything because the cauldron already has this really nice texture, so I'm just dabbing it on lightly and not caring if it's really even. And then once I'm done with it, I'm adding some dark brown wash to all of the parts of the cauldron just to give it a little bit more depth and variety, and I'm carefully dabbing that off with a paper towel but not trying to remove too much. And afterwards the cauldrons are technically done. Now to paint the ghosties and their friends for the first time. And yes, I'm saying for the first time because I'm missing the part after kind of a little bit, so I have to repaint some stuff, but that's totally fine. The reason why I'm not really worried about like overpainting on these little critters here is because I noticed that the clay I used for the ghost, it turned like yellow even though it started out a bit more white. So the light white clay turned a bit too yellow for my taste, and I also wanted to shade the ghost anyway, and that's like easier if you have an acrylic base color already down. So I started off with the spider and the frog. For the frog it's just 2 shades of green, one like darker base shade, and then I'm just stippling on the lighter one on top on its back. And then for the spider it's literally just all black. And then it's time to add the white for the ghosties. For the pure black spider it took a couple coats to like cover the edges, but luckily my trusty heat gun helped me speed up the progress quite a lot, because after like 4 layers of thin white paint, I didn't want to add too much texture. I finally had everything covered. So I actually used like very thin white paint that wasn't too covering, just to not have any brush strokes. Because I actually really didn't want to like hide any of the textures I added when I shaped the clay. Because there's a lot of bumps in there that I actually really like. This clay was like really hard to smooth out, like perfectly, so to speak, before I baked it. And I don't even know if you can even sand it because it's so soft and slightly, it's slightly flexible, not too much, but slightly. So I just added the white as a base, and then I added some black onto the eyes for the frog, and some white for the spider, and then some black for the pupils, and then some eye shines. And that's basically everything kind of done. But the ghosts don't really have shading, so I first thought, hey, let's do some block shading. So I mixed up a lighter grey, and I just filled in like the inner parts of the folds, like the valleys, and just like left it like this. I didn't really blend it out. I wanted to have it like cutesy and cartoonish looking, and in principle I really liked it, but with like me having to repaint it later, I'm gonna switch it up a bit more and go more into my comfort zone, because I quite like blending out colors. Like usually I add her a color artist, and it like really is like so much fun to blend like paints with watercolors, and I tend to also do that a lot with acrylics. Now these cauldrons and the ghosts were very light, so I needed to weight it down, so I just picked up some rocks, like some tiny pieces of gravel, and I put them inside, and then to make the not like too noisy, just in case when you move them, I actually also like stuffed it with some normal like kitchen paper roll, and then it was time to glue the ghost on top. And with the added like liquid stuff that I want to add onto the cauldron, I'm not too worried about like covering all of the patches where the paper was. And then after that dried, it was finally time for another medium. I was thinking long and hard about how I could add like a little bit of like, you know, liquid overspill of the cauldron where the ghosts emerged. And at first I thought, hey, I'm gonna use more clay, but then I was like, well, it would have to be some kind of air dry or like epoxy clay, because I cannot bake this anymore because the cauldrons are plastic. And I thought, but that would be way too heavy. And then I remembered we still had some acrylic like gap spackle stuff, and that was actually perfect for filling and everything. Now, it was way messier than I thought. I thought I could just apply it with my glove and like not have it spill too much onto the colored areas, but this stuff is sticky as heck. So I tried to not get too much on the ghost, really didn't work. But I decided to move on and just work on it until I have the desired shapes and just paint it over later. So I'm adding a little bit of like spilled over stuff, and this is literally just a pure acrylic like gap filler, and I'm using some alcohol and on a brush to smooth this out. I don't know if you should use water or alcohol. The alcohol kind of made a little bit of the top like flake off, so I think it reacted with it a little bit, but after that was evaporated, like everything was fine again and it kind of worked. But I think you're supposed to use water or something to smooth this. But hey, you live and you learn, and this was kind of the first time ever I worked with this kind of medium, because I've used like silicone before out of like the like cartridges, but I've never used this kind of acrylic medium before, and it was definitely behaving different. That being said, my decision to use this over silicone is more so because we had an open tube already and, you know, didn't want to waste it. And while it was still sticky, I tried to color it a little bit more, so I added some of this mica powder, and this of course spilled all over the ghost too, so that needed to be painted over, because it's not really easy to clean off mica powder, especially if you haven't like sealed your acrylic painting before. And this wasn't really sealed, and it was still sticky, and acrylics actually take a while to dry like fully and to not be sticky anymore and to be like actually wipeable. So in the end, when I tried to wipe that off, I also caused some gaps on the acrylic base, which I didn't think it wouldn't stick that well, but apparently it didn't really stick that well once it was dry, at least not on the surface. It was really easy to wipe it off in some parts. But after all that, and after everything was set enough, which took like a couple days because the stuff really takes a long time to fully cure, it was time to repaint everything. And I just literally right beforehand used like a piece of tissue with some water and wiped off like most of the stuff. I found out that the clay doesn't really hold the paint that well anyways, because like a lot of the white just completely like wiped up with it. But I'm going to seal these with some matte varnish anyways, like with some matte spray varnish, so that should really prevent everything from chipping off easily. And then it was just base white again, and then I added like a darker grey, and then I started blending. So I went back and forth between the light white and the grey, just covering things up and doing like a wet blend, and that actually looked really nice. Like, don't get me wrong, I also like the like lighter grey, like boxy shading, blocky shading that I did before, but these blends really add a nice bit of softness that I guess it was missing a little bit, just to add to the cuteness factor. I think the others were a bit too harsh in comparison. So in the end, it was kind of a blessing in disguise that I missed out. Also, yes, I have to repaint the cauldron a little bit, but I'm going to do that with a brush, so that should be really easy. And then I added some black into the eyes sockets once again to fix that, tried everything. I had to repaint parts of the frog a little bit with the darker green, but not too badly, same with the spider. But it really like didn't ruin too much of that paint job, so not too much work. And then for the like shine, I just basically used some high gloss varnish and I mixed it with a ton of mica powder, and you can basically paint this onto anything. I've used this method like a ton of times before. You can add too much mica powder and make the mixture way too like stiff and textured, which may work out if you really want a textured mixture, but it doesn't really help in like spreading it evenly, so I aim for like 2 coats on each. One with the greenish gold, and then of course then with this pink and purple tone for the other ghost. And this was actually so satisfying to paint on, like even though the first coat didn't fully cover everything, like just lathering it on basically with my brush was so satisfying. And then after just painting over like the edges a little bit on the cauldron and fixing that, man, the ghosties are finally done. And even though I had a lot of mess ups, surprisingly it wasn't that difficult to fix, and besides the drying time of the acrylic filler, it didn't actually take long at all for this project, and it was a lot of fun again to test out new mediums. So yeah, now I know that if I ever use this acrylic filler again, I will not paint things beforehand, because it's a waste of time and effort. And I also know like a little bit more about this lightweight sculpey. It's definitely a very interesting clay. It's like not really like foam clay, like it definitely blends a bit better, but it really feels like a lightweight foam in a way. I want to experiment and use this more. I wonder if there's like a way to actually get it to blend smoother, because it didn't have the typical like oils and stuff that help in the other polymer clays to blend. But I really loved that it was oven bake, because yes, foam clay and stuff, you know, they do air dry, so you don't have that long of a working time to like blend things. Which I know you can use water and all that to like lengthen that time, but it's still like limited in that regard. And you know, just being able to make it whenever to harden instead of like having to worry about it drying too quickly really is more pleasant. So that was a lot of fun to try out, and I think the ghosties turned out absolutely adorable. I love their little companions, and I love their poses just like coming out of the liquid. And I think it's just such a good Halloween decor. Of course, you don't have to add ghosties into your cauldrons. You can like add any other Halloweeny or non-Halloweeny creature or animal that you want. And I think that's like the fun about these kind of crafts, because you can really customize them quite a lot. And all it really took was some clay. Okay, some of the sack, but you can replace them with like air dry clay, and like these like really cheap plastic cauldrons that cost me like 50 cents a piece. And this was like definitely the best Halloween craft this year. I mean, the other one was kind of a weirdo, had really a lot of fun with the painting of the tiny canvases, but these just were such a joy to work on, and I again really loved the outcome. You could probably like upgrade it even more if you like have maybe resin cauldrons or something, or like, you know, add some gaps there and put some like dry ice in like underneath the ghost, like make the ghost just sit on top loosely and like have the dry ice bubble over and create fogs and things like that. Or like add lights or something, but I wanted to keep it fairly simple because I don't really have those means a lot. So, you know, having just something I can put on my shelf that's really adorable worked out amazingly for me. Anyways, let me know in the comments down below what you think of this project, and let me know if you have any fun Halloween plans this year. And as always, I hope you have a great day. See you next time. Bye bye!